Chapter 1. The Friend. I had an imaginary friend when I was 4 years old. I know this is common. I know children invent companions for themselves, project personalities onto empty spaces, and eventually grow out of it. I'm not telling you this because I think my imaginary friend was unusual. I'm telling you because of what my mother told me about it last year, 30 years after the fact. When I mentioned it offhandedly at a family dinner, I remembered the friend vaguely, a presence I called the boy in the corner, who I apparently spoke to at length during meals and at bedtime, and who I described to my parents as living behind the radiator in my bedroom. Standard imaginary friend behavior for a 4-year-old. My parents had not been concerned. They had played along the way parents do, setting an extra place at the table occasionally, saying goodnight to the corner of my room. What my mother told me at dinner last year was that they had stopped playing along after about 3 months. Not because they were worried, she said, but because of one specific thing I had told them about the boy in the corner. I had told them he was sad because nobody could see him anymore. My parents had asked me what I meant. I had said, and my mother quoted this to me directly, 30 years later, with the specific recall that parents have for things their children say that disturb them. I had said that the boy had told me he used to live in the house, but nobody remembered him now, and it made him lonely. My mother had asked how old the boy was. I had said I didn't know, but that he looked like me. She had asked his name. I had said he didn't have one anymore because nobody used it. She told me at dinner that she had looked into the history of the house after that. It was a standard suburban house built in the 1970s, not old enough to carry obvious history, and she hadn't found anything. She had filed it under the category of things children say that you don't examine too closely. But she told me one more thing. She told me that when we moved out of that house, I was 6. I have no memory of this. I had stood in the doorway of my bedroom for a long time before leaving. She had asked me what I was doing.
I had said I was saying goodbye. She had asked goodbye to whom? I had said the boy had asked me not to say his name in case it helped someone find him, and she should probably not ask again.
She said she hadn't asked again. She said she still thought about it sometimes. She said the part that stayed with her wasn't the imaginary friend itself, but the request not to say the name, the internal logic of it, the specificity. Children make things up, she said, but that kind of specificity was unusual, even for me. I don't remember the boy in the corner. I don't remember saying any of those things. I don't remember the goodbye in the doorway, but I drove past the house last spring just to see it, and I sat in the car outside for a while looking at the window of my old bedroom, and I felt something I couldn't name precisely, not sadness, not fear, but something adjacent to both, something like recognition. I drove away without going in. I didn't say goodbye. Chapter 2. The Photograph Album. My grandmother kept photograph albums. Not digital, actual albums, the kind with sticky pages and plastic overlays, going back decades. When she died last year, we went through the albums as part of settling her estate, scanning what we wanted to keep, deciding what to do with the rest. I was the one who went through them. My mother found it too emotional and my aunt lived too far away, so it fell to me to sit at my grandmother's kitchen table for 2 days going through 50 years of her life in photographs. It was slow, meaningful work. I knew most of the people in the photographs. I knew which holidays were which houses were which versions of family members were from which decade. On the second day, I found the album from 1987. My grandmother had been 53. My mother had been in her late 20s. I was in some of the photographs as a baby, which was strange to see, a version of me that I have no memory of being. Toward the back of the 1987 album, there was a section of photographs from a family gathering at my grandparents' house, a summer barbecue. From the look of it, tables in the backyard, people in summer clothing, the old elm tree that my grandfather had cut down in the early 1990s, still standing. I recognized most of the people, extended family, neighbors, people I had known growing up. In the third photograph, from the end of the section, there was someone I didn't recognize. He was standing at the edge of the group, slightly apart, looking directly at the camera. Adult male, somewhere in his 40s or 50s, unremarkable in appearance. Dark clothing, which was slightly incongruous with the summer event, but not dramatically so. I assumed he was a neighbor or a colleague of my grandfather's that I simply didn't know. I went through the rest of the album. He appeared in 2 more photographs from the same event, always at the edge, always slightly apart, always looking directly at the camera with the same neutral expression. I called my mother and described him. She couldn't place him. I called my aunt. She couldn't either. I scanned the photographs and sent them to both of them. My aunt called back an hour later and said she had shown the photograph to my uncle, who had been at that gathering. He didn't recognize the man either. He said he didn't remember anyone at the gathering who looked like that. I went back to the album and looked at the photographs more carefully. In the first group photograph, the widest shot showing the most people, he was not in it. He appeared only in 3 photographs taken later in the event, from closer angles, as if he had arrived after the group photograph was taken. My grandmother's neighbor, who was also in some of the photographs and who is now in her 80s, told me she remembered the gathering well. I showed her the photographs with the man in them. She looked at them for a long time. Then she said she didn't remember him being there. She said she would have remembered a stranger at the gathering because it was mostly family and close neighbors. She said she didn't know how he could be in the photographs if she didn't remember him being there. I don't know who the man in the photographs is. I don't know how he appeared in 3 photographs of a private family event without anyone remembering him. The photographs are real. I have had them verified. The man is real. He is clearly present, clearly photographed, not a double exposure or an artifact. My grandmother never mentioned him. I don't know if she knew who he was. I don't know if she ever looked at those photographs and noticed him there, at the edge of her family gathering, watching.
Chapter 3. The house I grew up in. I went back to the house I grew up in last spring.
Not to visit. The family that lives there now are strangers, but just to drive past, the way you do when you're back in a town you haven't been to in years. It was a Saturday morning, and I drove slowly past the house and looked at it, and it looked mostly the same. The way houses do when you've been away long enough that the changes accumulate without you noticing any single one. I would have kept driving except that the front door was open. Not dramatically open, just ajar, maybe 6 inches, the way a door gets when the latch hasn't caught properly. I slowed down and looked at it. There was no car in the driveway. The windows were dark. It was 9 a.m. on a Saturday, and the house looked empty. I stopped the car. I sat for a moment. Then I got out and walked up the front path. The same front path I had walked up thousands of times as a child, and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. I pushed the door open slightly and called out. No response. The hallway was visible through the gap, dark, quiet, exactly as I remembered it, except for the wallpaper, which was different. I stepped inside. I know I shouldn't have. I want to be clear that I knew I was entering someone else's home without permission, and that this was wrong. But the door was open, and the house looked empty, and I was standing in my childhood home for the first time in 20 years, and I stepped inside. The hallway was exactly as I remembered it in its proportions, same staircase, same position of doors, same quality of light from the window at the top of the stairs. I stood there for a moment, and I heard something from upstairs, a sound I recognized immediately, in the way you recognize something you haven't thought about in decades, but that goes directly to some older part of memory, the specific creak of the 3rd stair from the top. I had avoided that stair as a child coming home late. I knew exactly what it sounded like. Someone or something had just stepped on it. I left immediately. I went back to my car and sat for a long time with my hands on the wheel. After about 10 minutes, a woman came out of the house next door and started gardening. I called out to her and asked about the house. She said the family who lived there had gone away for the weekend. She said the house should be empty. I told her the front door had been open. She said that was strange. She hadn't noticed. She looked at the house. The front door was now closed. I drove away. I have not been back. I think about the third stair from the top sometimes, the specific sound of it, the fact that I recognized it instantly after 20 years, the fact that someone or something was on it at 9 a.m. on a Saturday in an empty house with the front door open. I think about what knew I was there. I think about whether it had always been there, in the house I grew up in, and whether I simply hadn't known